A 17-ton John Deere tractor sat broken for 11 days in the middle of nowhere. Martha, the young widow who cleaned the stables, asked the head mechanic to examine the machine. 5 minutes later, Peter, the millionaire owner, arrived. When he saw her, he exploded. "You! Impossible!" The 6 mechanics watched helplessly as he ridiculed her mercilessly. But when Martha removed the valve cover and pointed to clogged channels no one had checked, everyone fell silent. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on the cornfield. Martha Rivera stood beside the John Deere tractor, the most expensive on the ranch. 17 tons of green metal with the hood raised, engine exposed. Her hands gripped a wrench with the ease of someone who'd grown up assembling parts since age 16. The blue denim coveralls were still clean. The yellow bandana around her neck was the only splash of bright color. Her black hair, pulled back in a thick bun, remained impeccable even in the heat. Behind her, 6 mechanics watched in silence. Hector Morales, the 52-year-old head mechanic, stood with arms crossed over his grease-stained coveralls. Edward Sanchez, George Ramirez, Alfred Cruz, Steve Torres, and Robert Flores completed the group, all with looks mixing curiosity and doubt. 11 days. The tractor had stopped working 11 days ago after overheating. There was no part they hadn't replaced that didn't solve anything. Final diagnosis: seized engine. $3,000 to $6,000 to rebuild or replace. Martha had asked to examine the tractor. Hector ignored her. "Go back to your work." But she insisted. She mentioned years helping her grandfather Antonio in his small shop. Hector, exhausted after 11 days of failure, gave in. "Fine, but the owner should be arriving soon." 5 minutes hadn't passed. The sound came first, a pickup approaching. Martha continued examining the engine. Then the voice cut through the air. "What's she doing there?" Peter Castellanos descended with the presence of someone born owning land. 42 years old, tan cowboy hat, plaid shirt over khaki pants. He looked from Hector to Martha, and his expression changed to disbelief. Hector explained quickly. "Mr. Castellanos, she has mechanical experience. She learned from her grandfather. She asked to try." Peter cut him off, his eyes fixed on Martha, the woman who cleaned the stables, whom he'd seen doing basic manual labor. "You? Impossible." The laughter was loud, harsh, cruel. Peter gestured widely. "This is the last straw. The girl who cleans the stables is going to fix what 6 professional mechanics couldn't? Seriously?" Some mechanics looked away. Martha didn't respond, didn't lower her head. Her eyes met Peter's for a second, expressing silent disapproval before returning to the engine. She knew words wouldn't change anything, only actions. Peter turned to Hector, smiling with disdain. "Real funny joke? Tell her to get back to work." Martha spoke, voice calm and firm without anger. "I've already identified the problem, Mr. Castellanos. In the next few minutes I'll make the repair." Peter's smile faltered. Something in her voice, in her posture, in her calm confidence, transformed scorn into tense curiosity. "You have 55 minutes, he finally said, crossing his arms. "Not 1 minute more." Martha nodded, turned back to the engine, and began working while 7 men watched, some hoping she'd fail, one hoping she was right, all about to witness something unexpected. Antonio Rivera had never been a famous mechanic. For 43 years, he worked in outside shops, fixing everything from vans to tractors. When engines refused to start after others had failed, they called Antonio. He listened, observed, felt the metal, and found the problem. "Small problems cause big failures, my dear," Antonio used to tell young Martha. "People look for what's complicated, but sometimes the problem is a tiny part hidden where no one wants to look." Martha grew up watching. From age 10, she observed Antonio work in his home shop, crammed with organized tools, aligned parts, constantly smelling of oil. Antonio noticed her curiosity and invited her closer. "Touch this. Feel the weight. Tools speak." At 12, Martha could identify tools with her eyes closed. At 14, she was disassembling carburetors while Antonio explained their functions. At 16, when Antonio brought complete engines to rebuild, Martha assembled and disassembled parts while he watched proudly. "You learn faster than many who pay for technical schools," Antonio would say. His wife, Grace, watched with concern. "Antonio, the girl should be studying something more appropriate." "Appropriate for whom?" Antonio responded. "She has talent. It would be a crime to waste it." At 18, Martha had helped rebuild over 30 engines. Antonio taught technique and method. Don't assume, investigate. Don't guess, eliminate, and never underestimate small problems. 3 years ago, everything changed. Antonio felt pain in his chest one Saturday afternoon. He called for help. Martha was buying parts. When she arrived, the ambulance had already taken her grandfather. At the hospital, they worked for 2 hours, but his heart didn't respond. The funeral was simple. Martha didn't cry during the ceremony. She stayed strong, supporting Grace. Only later, at night, when she saw the tools arranged with Antonio's perfection, did she let the tears flow. She took the pocket watch Antonio had given her, which he'd always carried, and pressed it against her chest. "I promise, Grandpa, I won't let what you taught me die with me." For 3 years, Martha worked cleaning stables on the ranch. She loved horses, but every time she passed the mechanical shop, she felt a pull. That's what she really wanted. She just needed the chance. Now, beside the John Deere, with 55 minutes to prove herself, Martha touched the watch in her pocket and remembered. When everything external works but the engine overheats, the problem is inside, dear. I'd look right there. Peter Castellanos hadn't always been the cynical man watching Martha with disdain. Decades ago, there existed another version, one who trusted people without constantly measuring intentions. But that version died under the weight of a silent question. Why aren't you like your father? Arthur Castellanos was a local legend. Born into a landless family, he started as a day laborer at 16. At 25, he bought his first 10 acres. At 50, he owned 1,500 prosperous acres. What was special about Arthur wasn't just the money, but the way he treated his workers. He paid fair wages, listened to suggestions, paid doctors when workers got sick. He distributed bonuses for good harvests. "The land produces because hands cultivate it," Arthur used to say. "Take care of your people. They'll take care of your property." Peter grew up seeing this. He saw workers who genuinely respected his father out of gratitude, not fear. He saw families that stayed for decades because they were treated like people, and it made him feel small in comparison. Because Peter hadn't built anything. He'd inherited the property. 6 years ago, Arthur died suddenly from an aneurysm. He was 67. The funeral drew hundreds. Everyone cried genuine tears. They all told stories of generosity. Peter, then 36, felt the weight of impossible expectations. How could he fill the shoes of someone who'd built an empire from poverty? In the first years, he tried maintaining his father's policies, but with each mistake, each harvest that didn't meet expectations, each machine that broke, Peter felt the question, Arthur would have handled this better. Gradually, Peter changed. He became more demanding, more distant, less patient. He began measuring everything in dollars, not in people. Workers noticed. Some left, others stayed out of necessity, but without the enthusiasm of before. Now, 6 years later, Peter faced a tractor that had been down for 11 days. He could absorb the losses, but it proved his incompetence as a manager. He'd hired 6 mechanics, paid them well, authorized expensive parts, and all had failed. Arthur never would have allowed this. Arthur would have found a solution. But Arthur was dead. Peter was alone, surrounded by inherited success he didn't feel was his, surrounded by the shadow of a father who remained larger than life. And now this woman, Martha, who cleaned stables, dared suggest she could solve what expensive professionals couldn't. It was offensive. It was absurd. Peter watched Martha work with steady hands, saw concentration and calm confidence. For a brief instant, he wondered, what if she really can? He shook his head. Impossible, but the doubt had already settled in. The tractor stopped 11 days ago when Tony Cruz, the operator, was ploughing heavy ground. Engine temperature climbed from 160 to 170, then to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. At 190, Tony shut it down, following protocol. If it passes 185, stop everything. He waited 30 minutes and tried starting. The engine turned twice and stopped. No more response. He called Hector. First diagnosis, clogged radiator. Fluid drained, radiator checked and cleaned. Hoses checked for leaks, water pump working. Puzzled, he ordered the tractor towed to the shop. Day 1. Hector checked the entire electrical system. Everything working. Tried jump-starting with auxiliary cables. The engine turned weakly but wouldn't catch. The problem wasn't electrical. Day 2. Edward dismantled and cleaned fuel filters. Checked injection pump. Correct pressure. Injectors working. Fuel system operating normally. Day 3. They checked cylinder compression, normal values, correct timing. Mechanically, everything seemed in order. Day 4. Peter arrived demanding explanations. How many days without knowing what's wrong? Hector requested more mechanics. Peter authorized. Days 5 to 6. George, Alfred and team joined. They diagnosed that overheating caused possible internal warping. Recommendation, thermostat replacement. Cost, $100. New thermostat installed. Nothing. Day 7. Steve suggested microscopic radiator blockage. They replaced the entire radiator. $400. Tried starting. Engine turned briefly, then stopped. Day 8. Robert hypothesized contaminated oil. Drained dark but not burned oil. Changed filter. Filled with new oil. Same result. Days 9-10. Emergency meeting. Edward verbalized what they feared. Internally seized engine. Heat caused warping in pistons or cylinders. Won't start without rebuilding or replacing the entire engine. How much? Peter asked. Rebuild $3,000. New engine $5,000. Installation another $1,000. Peter calculated $500 already spent on useless parts, $3,000 to $6,000 more. $6,500 in losses, totaling nearly $9,000. Prepare purchase order, get quotes tomorrow. Day 11. Tomorrow, Hector made one last attempt. Before ordering a new engine, he adjusted connections on the newly installed radiator and checked coolant level. He turned the key. The engine rumbled. It worked. Temperature stable. 180 dig. 122 dig. Stabilized at 185 degrees. Hector couldn't believe it. After 11 days, it finally caught. The tractor operated 2 full hours in the shop without overheating, without failures. The 6 mechanics watched with relief, mixed with confusion. Nobody knew exactly what had solved it, but it worked. Peter arrived at the shop. It's working. Yes, Mr. Castellanos. 2 hours without problems. I need to be sure. Take it to the field. Real test. Tony Cruz got in the cab, started the engine, drove the John Deere from the shop to the cultivation area, the same cornfield sector where it had failed 11 days before. He lowered the plough. He began heavy work under the midday sun. 20 minutes later, temperature began rising. 185 degree, 188 degree, 192 degree. The engine sputtered. It stopped. Exactly the same spot. Exactly the same problem. 11 days of work, $500 wasted, and the tractor still didn't work under real load. The 6 mechanics arrived at the cornfield with defeated expressions. Hector watched the engine in silence. They didn't know what else to try. Then Martha Rivera, the young widow who cleaned stables, approached, walking between corn plants, and asked to examine the tractor. Hector, exhausted after 11 days of failure, barely looked at her. "Go back to your work." But she insisted, mentioning years helping her grandfather Antonio in his small shop. Hector, with no options and no hope, finally made a gesture of resignation. "Fine, but the owner should already be arriving." 5 minutes hadn't passed when the sound of Peter's pickup cut through the hot midday air. Martha knelt beside the tractor that had just stopped again in the cornfield. 55 minutes. Peter had granted that deadline, communicated with the tone of someone granting an absurd whim. The engine was still warm from recent work. 11 days in the shop, 2 hours running perfectly, 20 minutes of field testing before failing exactly where it had failed before. She placed her hand on the engine block near the exhaust manifold. Hot. She moved her hand to the opposite side near the air filter. Different temperature. First observation. She walked around, observing every angle. 6-cylinder diesel engine. Robust design typical of heavy tractors. Antonio had rebuilt 3 similar ones. When a diesel engine overheats and won't start anymore, Antonio had explained, people assume something big broke. Pistons, cylinders. But often the problem isn't the big thing, but the small thing everyone ignored. Martha touched the new radiator. Shiny. $400 wasted on the wrong part. She also checked the new hoses. Connections tight, no leaks. Edward commented loud enough for everyone to hear. "We already checked all that. Cooling system is perfect. It ran 2 hours in the shop." "But it failed under heavy work," Martha responded, without taking her eyes off the engine. She touched the water pump. It spun smoothly. She checked the oil. Clean. Correct level. "Miss," Jorge interrupted, frustrated. "Obviously, we checked compression on all cylinders. It ran 2 hours, then failed again. The engine is mechanically seized." Martha looked at Jorge. "Did you check internal water circulation?" Jorge frowned. "The cooling system is working. Pump operational. New radiator. New thermostat. We tested everything. I'm not referring to the external system, but to the internal channels in the block, the water passages that go through the engine head." Silence. Hector approached. "You're suggesting an internal blockage?" "I'm investigating." Martha touched the block at 3 points. "The engine heats unevenly, hotter on this side. That indicates water isn't circulating uniformly inside the block." Edward intervened challengingly. "Water circulates. That's why it worked in the shop." "Under light load," Martha nodded. "Partial circulation is sufficient, but not adequate for heavy work." "Exactly. Under heavy field work, the engine generates much more heat. Partial circulation is insufficient. The engine overheats. External system pressure may be correct, but if internal channels are blocked by mineral deposits or rust, water can't cool cylinders uniformly. Localized overheating. Engine overheats, pistons expand, pressing against cylinders." Alfred nodded slowly. "Mineral deposits. Hard water. That's why it worked at idle but failed under load." "Exactly. Well, water in this region has high calcium and magnesium levels. Without preventive flushing, minerals accumulate. Under light work conditions, the engine tolerates reduced circulation. Heavy work, blockage becomes critical." Steve asked, "How do you know it's not a mechanically seized engine?" Martha touched Antonio's watch in her pocket. "Mechanically seized engine doesn't run for 2 hours. This one ran perfectly in the shop. Failure occurred only under heavy field load. The pistons aren't permanently locked. They're tight. They expand due to accumulated heat that can't dissipate under intense work." Hector closed his eyes, processing everything. 11 days replacing external parts. The engine operated in a shop because light work didn't require full circulation. It failed in the field because heavy work exposed a problem no one had looked for. Peter had been watching in silence. Finally he spoke. "If you're so sure, why didn't anyone notice this?" Martha looked directly at him. Because it requires partially disassembling the cylinder head to access those channels. Dirty, heavy, uncomfortable work. It's easier when the engine runs in a shop to assume the problem's solved and attribute field failure to another cause. Hector lowered his gaze. 42 minutes, Peter announced. Martha stood. I need to remove the valve cover and access the water channels. 15-20 minutes to disassemble, 15 minutes to clean, 15 minutes to reassemble, 5 minutes to test. 55 minutes exactly. Martha walked to her toolbox and began selecting necessary tools. The 6 mechanics watched, aware they were about to witness something that would completely change the narrative of 11 days of failure. Martha opened her red toolbox, the same one Antonio used for decades, 3/4-inch socket wrench for valve cover bolts, flathead screwdriver for clips, a calibrated torque wrench that Antonio gave her when she turned 18. This tool is worth more than any diploma. She knelt beside the engine with defined purpose. The 6 mechanics formed a semicircle 10 feet away, watching with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Peter remained farther back, leaning against his truck with arms crossed. 38 minutes, Peter announced without looking at his watch. Martha placed the wrench on the first bolt. Years of vibration and heat had settled it firmly. She applied constant gradual pressure, adjusting the angle, redistributing weight, applying force with her shoulder. The bolt yielded with a sharp, metallic click. Hector watched the technique with professional attention. He noticed Martha knew exactly what she was doing. Proper technique, not brute force. 12 bolts total. Martha removed them in 8 minutes, placing them on the ground, lined up in exact order. Antonio taught, arrange bolts in order. When reassembling, you'll know exactly which goes where. With bolts removed, Martha placed both hands under the cover edges. 35 pounds of iron. She lifted with her legs, keeping the cover level to avoid damaging seals. The cover came loose with a slight suction pop. She placed it carefully on a clean cloth, then she leaned over the exposed engine. 6 cylinders visible, pistons in different positions, valves gleaming with residual oil, everything mechanically intact. But Martha wasn't looking at cylinders, she was looking at water channels. On the side of the block were small openings, 2-centimeter channels where the cooling system connected to internal passages. Water should circulate constantly there. Martha grabbed a small flashlight and turned it on. She pointed light toward the first channel. The light didn't pass through. It should have if it were clear. Something was completely blocking it. Second channel, same result. Third, fourth, all blocked. She sat back slowly and turned to the mechanics. The channels are completely blocked. Water can't circulate internally. That's causing engine overheating even though external components are working. Hector approached. May I see? Martha handed him the flashlight. Point at any channel. If they were clear, light should pass through. Hector tried. No light passed through. Another channel. Same result. 32 years working with engines, and I never checked for internal water channel blockage. Easy to miss, requires partial disassembly, and when there are more obvious explanations, we assume the engine is seized, because those are serious failures that justify 11 days, Hector added. Peter approached. He observed the exposed interior, the blocked channels. His expression had changed. Contempt, replaced by something more complex. 28 minutes. Can you clean this, Martha? She nodded. Yes, I need water and flexible wire. Robert, Peter ordered, bring the hose from the shop and break cable. Robert ran. Martha watched the engine, calculating mentally. 4 blocked channels. She needed to break the blockage mechanically, dissolve debris, and flush with pressurized water. She touched Antonio's watch. Small problems cause big failures, Grandpa. You were right. And when Robert returned with the hose and wire, Martha began the work that would change everything Peter Castellanos believed about competence and real value. Martha took the brake cable, thin but resistant, 2 mm diameter, flexible yet rigid. She inspected it, checking for no burrs that could scratch the internal metal. "I need someone to hold a flashlight pointed at the channel." Alfred stepped forward. "I'll do it." Martha positioned herself beside the first channel while Alfred directed light. The light revealed a blocked surface, a solid reddish-brown mass. Total blockage. She inserted the wire carefully, found resistance immediately. It wasn't metal on metal, but something granular and compacted. She applied gentle pressure. The wire penetrated 1 centimeter before stopping. "What exactly is this?" Steve asked. "Mineral deposits," Martha explained, moving the wire in small circles. "Well, water has high calcium and magnesium content. When it passes through a hot engine, minerals precipitate. Lime scale." "Exactly," Edward said. "But in engine channels, oxidation mixes with rust, sediment, oil residue. It compacts over years. Each heating cycle hardens the mass further. It becomes almost like stone." The wire penetrated another 2 centimeters. Martha removed it and examined the tip, covered with brown paste with a consistency like dried clay. George crouched down. "This completely blocks circulation?" "Doesn't need to completely block it. Just reduce flow by 60 or 70%. Water enters, pump generates pressure, everything seems normal from outside. But internally water doesn't circulate enough. Engine overheats locally, pistons expand and lock. But when the engine cools, Hector added, understanding, pistons contract, so it turns briefly. It's not permanently locked." "Exactly." Martha worked 5 minutes on the first channel, breaking down the mass bit by bit. Finally, when she inserted the wire completely and Alfred directed light from the other side, a point of light came through. "It passed through," Alfred announced. Martha moved to the second channel, then third, fourth. While she worked, Edward asked, "Why didn't anyone think of this?" Martha continued working while speaking, voice without judgment, just honesty. "Because it's uncomfortable work, requires bending over, getting dirty, difficult angles, and when more convenient diagnoses exist, it's human to assume the worst instead of investigating the tedious." Hector felt the weight of those words. 11 days, 6 mechanics, thousands of dollars, and the solution was in channels no one checked because it required manual, dirty, patient work that Martha did without complaining. Peter watched from 15 feet away. His expression had completely changed. No more mockery. There was uncomfortable recognition of how much he'd underestimated this woman. Martha finished unclogging 4 channels. Brown fragments had fallen inside. They needed removal, or they'd contaminate the system again. "Robert, can you bring the hose now?" Robert connected the hose to the water source. Martha directed the tip toward the first channel, opened the flow, and pressurized water entered and began flowing to the other side, carrying fragments, sediment, years of debris. Water came out completely brown at first. Martha continued patiently until it began to clear, then clearer. Finally, after nearly 3 minutes, water came out practically transparent. She repeated the process on the other 3 channels. Hector watched brown water shake out and shook his head. All this time, that was the problem. 18 minutes, Peter announced, voice tense but without mocking tone. Martha shut off the water and prepared for the most critical part. Reassemble the cover with absolute precision. Because one mistake, one bolt tightened incorrectly, and everything would be useless. Martha knelt beside the cover on the cloth. She inspected it, checking for fragments stuck to it. She ran her hand along the edge where the seal was positioned. Clean, seal intact, no cracks, no deformations. "The seal is reusable, it's in good condition." Edward nodded. "We changed that cover 3 months ago during preventive maintenance." Martha lifted the cover, 35 pounds, with firm arms. She positioned it carefully on the block. Critical moment. It had to be perfectly level so the seal would compress uniformly. She lowered it slowly. The 12 holes for bolts aligned with block threads. Perfect. The cover seated without problems. Now the part that would separate correct technique from rushed work. She took the 12 bolts and aligned them in exact order. She began inserting them manually, turning each with her fingers until threads caught with a click. Hand tightened, enough to keep the cover in position without applying torque yet. "Why not tighten them immediately?" Steve asked. "Because I have to tighten them in a specific sequence. If I fully tighten one bolt before the others, the cover can warp. Seal won't compress uniformly. There'll be leaks." She finished inserting 12 bolts manually. Then she took a socket wrench and began the first pass, tightening each bolt enough to work diagonally. "Always diagonal, my dear," she remembered Antonio's voice. "Never in a circle." She completed the first round in 2 minutes, then second pass with more force, feeling the seal compress uniformly. The mechanics watched in almost reverent silence. Finally, Martha took the calibrated torque wrench. She adjusted it to 45 foot-pounds, the specified torque for these bolts. "How do you know the correct torque?" Robert asked. "My grandfather rebuilt 3 engines exactly like this. He made me memorize specifications, 45 foot-pounds for valve cover." She started with the first diagonal bolt, positioned the wrench and applied pressure gradually. The wrench made an audible click upon reaching correct torque. Click. Pressure released immediately. Next bolt. Click. Next. Click. Hector watched each movement. Impressive precision. Pure technique built with years of practice and confidence. 12 bolts, 12 perfect clicks, exactly 6 minutes. Martha stood, put away the wrench, washed her hands. Cover completely returned, channels clear, everything ready for the final test. 10 minutes, Peter announced. He'd lost the mocking tone. Now there was almost no tension. Martha walked around, checking no forgotten tools, connections secure, nothing out of place. Satisfied, she stopped next to the cab door. "May I?" she asked, looking at Tony Cruz, the usual operator. Tony nodded proudly. "It's all yours, Miss Martha." She got in, worn leather seat molded by years of use. She sat, adjusted position, placed hands on the wheel, metal hot from the sun, and looked at the instrument panel. Temperature gauge, oil pressure gauge, tachometer, everything off. Waiting. She touched Antonio's pocket watch. "This is for you, Grandpa." She inserted the key in the ignition, took a deep breath, and turned it. The starter turned with a deep, heavy sound, metal against metal after 11 days of immobility. Once, twice. The engine coughed briefly but didn't catch. Martha waited 3 seconds and turned the key again. The engine turned again, once, twice, 3, 4 full rotations. It coughed harder, as if trying to remember how to operate. Then, with a deep roar that made the entire chassis vibrate, the 6-cylinder diesel engine came to life. The sound filled the cornfield. Powerful, deep, constant, without irregularity, without choking. Healthy roar of 17 tons of machinery operating exactly as it should. The 6 mechanics stood motionless, processing 11 days of work, 4 wasted diagnoses, and the solution that required an hour of methodical work on channels no one checked. Martha checked the panel. Oil pressure gauge rose immediately, 15 psi, then 30, stabilizing at 45. Perfect. Now the real test. Temperature. The gauge started at 0, rose slowly. 86 degree. 104 degree, 122 degree, 140 degree. Martha kept the engine idling, letting it warm gradually. Mechanics approached, forming a semicircle, all watching gauges. 160 degree, 106 170-60. Peter walked until he was 6 feet away, hands in pockets, posture trying to seem casual but revealing tension. 179 degree, 185 degree. Engine continued roaring constantly, no abnormal sounds, no excessive vibrations. 182 degree, 184 degree. Martha remembered Tony Cruz's words. If it passes 185, stop everything. The gauge stabilized at 185 degrees exactly, didn't rise further. Water circulated through clean channels, absorbing heat, taking it to the radiator, cooling it, and returning. The cycle worked. She waited 2 full minutes at idle. Temperature remained stable, no oscillations, perfectly constant. Then, keeping the brake pressed, Martha engaged first gear. She released the clutch slowly. The steel tracks creaked, metal against metal, surface rust from 11 days starting to crack. The tractor moved slowly at first, then more smoothly, 5 meters forward. Martha stopped and engaged reverse. 5 meters back, stopped, engaged second gear. Tractor accelerated. Tracks responded perfectly. Temperature gauge didn't move. 185 degrees stable. Martha turned off the engine. Absolute silence. She got out slowly, legs stiff from kneeling so long, hands dirty with grease, coveralls with stains on knees, elbows and chest, but eyes bright, not with arrogance, with quiet satisfaction of work well done. Hector was the first to move, 3 steps toward Martha. Extended hand. "Miss Rivera, I apologize and congratulate you. What you just did, I should have found." Martha shook his hand. "Mr. Morales, you're an excellent mechanic. Sometimes the problem isn't skill, but perspective." Edward approached. "Maybe $20. That's the repair cost compared to $3,000 to $5,000 unnecessary." George added, "Miss, your systematic elimination method is superior." Alfred, Steve and Robert nodded in agreement. But the person Martha needed to see was Peter. He remained motionless 15 feet away. His expression had gone through multiple transformations. Martha walked toward him, stopped 6 feet away, waited. Peter finally spoke, voice low. 53 minutes. Solved in 53 minutes what 6 mechanics couldn't do in 11 days. Long pause. When he resumed, there was something different in his voice. "I need to speak with you, Miss Rivera, and with Hector in my office. Tomorrow at 9. It wasn't an order. It was an invitation, and the tone suggested something important was about to change." Peter Castellanos removed his cowboy hat, a gesture everyone immediately noticed. In ranch culture, a boss removing his hat to an employee was a public statement of respect that transcended hierarchies. "Before anyone leaves," Peter said, voice loud enough for 6 mechanics and nearby workers to hear, "I need to say something." Nobody moved. "An hour ago, I behaved in a way I'm ashamed of today. I mocked Miss Martha Rivera when she offered to help. I laughed publicly. I declared it impossible that she could do what professional mechanics couldn't." Pause. He looked directly at Martha. "I was completely wrong. I judged her by appearance, not ability. And I almost wasted an opportunity to solve a problem, costing me thousands of dollars." Some employees exchanged surprised looks. Peter rarely admitted mistakes publicly. "Miss Rivera, I owe you a sincere apology for my mockery, for underestimating your competence, and for almost losing the opportunity to know one of the most talented mechanics this region has seen." Martha didn't know what to say. "You don't need to apologize, Mr. Castellanos." "Yes, I do. You deserve to hear this. Everyone deserves to hear this." He turned to the workers. "I want everyone to know something. From now on, Martha Rivera is part of the mechanical team. She won't be cleaning stables anymore." He turned to Hector. "Hector, starting tomorrow, Martha will work with your team. Same salary as Edward, $600 per month, full warehouse access." Hector nodded. "It will be an honor to work with her." Peter looked at Martha. "Do you accept?" Martha felt something expand in her chest. 3 years cleaning stables, 3 years waiting. "I accept. Thank you, Mr. Castellanos." Peter put his hat back on. "Don't thank me yet. You'll earn every penny. I have 6 more tractors, 3 combines, 2 generators, and 15 pickup trucks that need maintenance." Martha gave a slight smile. "I'll be ready." Tony Cruz approached with tears in his eyes. "Miss Martha, thank you so much. I spent 11 days thinking I'd lose my job, and you brought me peace of mind." Tony, you did exactly the right thing shutting down the engine. You prevented greater damage. Other workers approached. Some nodded respectfully, others shook Martha's hand. Ramon, an older man, spoke. Miss, I always tell my daughter that women can't work certain jobs. Today, you showed me I was wrong. I'm going to tell her this story. Martha felt a lump in her throat. Perspectives had changed. Edward approached with a notebook. Miss Rivera, could you explain your systematic elimination method? I'd like to document it. Martha agreed. She explained for 10 minutes the step-by-step process. Edward took notes. Alfred and Steve listened, asking questions. George approached Hector privately. I thought I knew everything about engines. Today, a 26-year-old woman taught me that without humility, it's arrogance. Hector nodded. I learned that too. Peter watched from a distance. He saw Martha surrounded by mechanics who hours before had watched her with skepticism. He saw workers treating her with genuine respect and regard. Arthur, he thought of his father, never underestimate someone who works with their hands. They build what thinkers can barely dream of. Arthur had been right, as always. When the sun began to set, workers returned to tasks. Mechanics went back to the shop. Tony drove the repaired John Deere back, engine roaring strong and healthy. Martha gathered her tools and stored them carefully, everything in its place, exactly as Antonio taught. When she closed the toolbox, Hector approached. Tomorrow at 7. We start early. Ready? Martha smiled. I've been ready for 3 years, Mr. Morales. Call me Hector. We're colleagues now. And as Martha walked toward the house she shared with her grandmother Grace, she touched Antonio's watch and whispered, I did it, Grandpa. I finally did it, and this is just the beginning. The knowledge Antonio passed on was still alive, and now she'd have the opportunity to use it as she'd always dreamed. If you're enjoying this story of perseverance and skill, please hit that like button and subscribe to Underrated Mechanics for more inspiring stories from the world of machinery and the incredible people who keep it running. And comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. The following months transformed the mechanical shop's dynamics. Martha arrived every day at 7 a.m., wearing clean blue coveralls, hair pulled back, carrying her red toolbox under her arm. Hector greeted her with coffee and the day's task list. Initially, the 6 mechanics watched with cautious curiosity. Respect, yes, but also expectation. Was the John Deere a lucky break, or did Martha possess consistent skill? The answer came 6 weeks after the first repair. An international combine stopped operations during peak harvest season. Edward and George worked 3 days, trying to diagnose why the hydraulic system was losing pressure intermittently. They changed seals, checked valves, replaced hoses. Nothing worked. Martha requested an inspection, found the problem in 20 minutes. A microscopic crack in the master hydraulic cylinder valve that only opened under extreme pressure during heavy work. Invisible at rest, almost impossible to detect without knowing exactly where to look. How did you know to look there? Edward asked, genuinely impressed. My grandfather fixed a combine with identical symptoms. He taught me that intermittent pressure means a failure that only appears under load. They replaced the cylinder, $200. The combine returned to the field. Peter calculated that Martha had prevented approximately $10,000 in losses from uncollected crops in time. The second case arrived 3 months later. A diesel generator powering the irrigation system failed overnight. Without power, pumps stopped, crops at risk. Alfred and Steve diagnosed alternator failure. They ordered a replacement part. $400, 3-day delivery time. Martha checked the generator that morning. The alternator was working perfectly. The problem was a thermal fuse hidden in the control box, a component that burned out due to momentary overload. She replaced it. The generator started immediately. Peter was present when Martha started the generator. He watched the irrigation system lights come on. He looked at Martha, said nothing, but his expression conveyed everything, deep recognition. That night, Peter called Hector to his office. "I need to talk about something important." Hector entered, concerned. Peter rarely called private evening meetings. "Sit down," Peter said. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon, a gesture Hector recognized as a sign the conversation would be between equals, not employer and employee. "You've worked here 32 years, Peter began. "You knew my father, worked with him since you were 20. "Arthur was like a father to me," Hector responded. "He taught me everything. I know, and you've been loyal, competent, and reliable." Peter paused. "That's why I need to tell you this personally before anyone else." Hector felt tension rise. "My sister in New Mexico is sick," Peter continued. "Stage 1 cancer, advanced age. My brother-in-law died last year. She has 3 kids under 12. She needs help." Hector began to understand where the conversation was going. "I've decided to move with my family to New Mexico to take care of my sister and her kids. I can't continue as head mechanic here." Heavy silence. "When?" Hector asked. 6 weeks. I want to give you time to prepare for the transition." Hector nodded slowly, processing 32 years at Castellanos Ranch, his entire adult life. But he understood family was priority. "I understand. I'll do everything I can to organize everything." Peter took a sip of bourbon. "Hector, I need to ask you something else. I need your honest opinion about who should be the next head mechanic." Hector didn't hesitate even a second. "Martha Rivera." Peter expected that answer, but wanted to hear the reasoning. "Why?" "Because in 5 months she's demonstrated something many mechanics don't show in decades. Not just technical skill, but method, systematic thinking, humility to question the obvious, and the ability to see problems others ignore because we assume too much." Hector paused. "Besides, Mr. Castellanos, the other 5 mechanics respect her. That's crucial. A leader not respected by the team can't lead effectively." Peter nodded. He'd already reached the same conclusion, but needed Hector's confirmation. "I'll speak with her tomorrow, but I want you present when I make the proposal. Your support will mean a lot to her." Hector extended his hand. "It would be an honor." The next morning, Peter called a meeting in his office. "Martha, Hector, please. 9 o'clock sharp." Martha arrived on time, nervous. Private meetings with the boss rarely brought good news. Hector was already seated there. Serious expression, but not worried. "Please sit, Miss Rivera," Peter said. Martha sat. Hector offered her a reassuring smile. Peter went straight to it. "Hector is moving to New Mexico in 6 weeks for family reasons." Martha felt a pang of sadness. Hector had been her mentor, her ally, the first mechanic to treat her as an equal. "I'm sorry, Hector. I hope your sister gets better." "Thank you, Martha," Peter continued. "That leaves me without a head mechanic. I need someone to lead a 6-mechanic team, manage maintenance operations on all ranch machinery, and make crucial technical decisions without constant supervision." He paused deliberately. "I'm offering you that position, Miss Rivera." Martha blinked, processing. "Head mechanic?" "Yes, salary, 1,150 monthly. You'll lead the entire team. You'll have authority to order parts, hire assistants if necessary, and make operational decisions." 1,150s, more than Martha had earned in her entire life, more than Antonio ever earned. "Mr. Castellanos, I barely have 5 months on the team. Edward has 20 years' experience, George 15. Why me?" Hector intervened. "Because experience isn't the same as excellence. Martha, in 5 months, you've shown what some don't show in decades." Peter nodded. The John Deere, the combine, the generator, 3 mechanical problems experienced people couldn't solve. You solve them because you think differently, because you don't make assumptions, because you investigate where others don't want to look. Martha looked at Hector for confirmation this wasn't an elaborate joke. "It's true, Martha," Hector said, "and nobody deserves this position more than you." Martha thought of Antonio, thought of 30 years working in other people's shops, earning modest salaries, never recognized beyond occasional clients. She thought of Grace, her grandmother, who washed other people's clothes to help when money was tight. And she thought of the promise she'd made 3 years ago, standing before Antonio's organized tools. "I won't let what you taught me die with me." "I accept," she finally said, voice firm, "but I have one condition." Peter raised an eyebrow. "Condition?" "I want to keep access to the stables. 2 hours every Saturday to care for the horses. I love them. I don't want to lose that connection." Peter smiled, the first genuine smile Martha had ever seen from him. "Agreed. The horses receive better care. I see no reason to change it. That's it." He extended his hand. Martha shook it. "Welcome, head mechanic." That afternoon, Hector gathered the 6 mechanics in the shop: Edward, George, Alfred, Steve, Robert. Everyone knew something important was about to happen. "I have 2 news items," Hector began. "First, I'm moving to New Mexico in 6 weeks for family reasons." Expressions of surprise. Edward spoke first. "Hector, man, we're sorry. Your sister—" "Yes, she's sick. She needs help with her kids." Understanding. "Second news. Martha Rivera will be the new head mechanic." Brief silence. Then Robert started clapping. Alfred joined. Steve, George, Edward. "About time," Edward said. "Nobody's more qualified." After the meeting, each mechanic approached Martha individually. George was first. "Martha, I want you to know something. When you arrived 5 months ago, I thought you were competent but inexperienced. I was wrong. You're not inexperienced. You see things my experience prevents me from seeing. George, your experience is valuable." "Experience is a trap if it doesn't come with humility," he interrupted. "You taught me that, thank you." Edward approached next. "Boss," he said with a smile, "I have a request. Could you show me your formal systematic elimination method? I want to document it. I think I can improve my own diagnostics." "Of course, Edward." Alfred was direct. "Martha, I promise to follow your instructions without questioning. I trust your judgment." Steve added, "And if you need me to work overtime or weekends, you can count on me." Robert, the youngest, spoke with shyness. "Can I keep asking you questions? I learn more from you than 2 years of technical school." Martha felt emotion tighten her throat. "Always, Robert, always." That night, she walked home where Grace was waiting with simple dinner: beans, cornbread, coffee. "How was your day, dear?" Grace asked. Martha sat. "Grandma, they offered me head mechanic for the entire ranch." Grace dropped a spoon. "What?" $1,150 monthly, leading a 6-mechanic team, managing all machinery." Tears began rolling down Grace's cheeks. "Antonio would be, oh my dear, he'd be so proud." "I know, Grandma." Grace took Martha's hands. "I always knew you were special, since you were 10, when you disassemble things just to see how they worked. Antonio saw it too. That's why he taught you everything." "I miss Grandpa so much." "He's here, dear, in every engine you fix, in every problem you solve. His wisdom lives on in you." Martha touched Antonio's watch in her pocket. "I'll honor him, Grandma. I'll be the best head mechanic this ranch has ever seen." Grace smiled through tears. "You already are, my dear. You already are." Peter Castellanos sat alone in his office that night. Dark wooden desk inherited from Arthur, leather chair where his father sat for decades, making decisions that built an empire from nothing. On the wall, a portrait of Arthur at 55, genuine smile, eyes conveying kindness and determination. Peter poured bourbon and toasted the portrait. "I think I finally understand, Dad." Silence in the empty office. Just the sound of night wind against windows. I spent 6 years trying to prove I was as good as you. Better even. I paid high salaries, thinking money buys loyalty. I hired expensive specialists, thinking degrees guarantee competence. I gave everything in dollars, because dollars are quantifiable, controllable. He took a long sip. But I was wrong, completely wrong. He remembered 5 months ago, 11 days. Tractor down. 6 professional mechanics failing, thousands of dollars wasted, and his reaction when a stable cleaner offered help. Laughter. Public, cruel ridicule. You? Impossible. Dad? I mocked her. Humiliated her in front of everyone because she cleaned stables, because she didn't have a degree, because she was a woman in a man's world. Peter closed his eyes, feeling a fresh wave of shame. And in 1 hour she did what 6 professionals couldn't do in 11 days. Not with money, not with degrees, but with true knowledge, with the method her grandfather, a modest mechanic like you, were a humble farmer, taught her. He stood and walked to the portrait, touched the frame with his fingers. I remembered something you said when I was 18. I'd just graduated from university. I was proud of my degree, and you said, "Peter, that paper is beautiful, but paper doesn't harvest corn. Hands do. Always respect those who work with their hands. They build what thinkers can barely imagine." Tears began to well. I didn't listen to you, Dad. I thought you were old-fashioned, thought formal education was superior to practical knowledge. It took 6 years. And the public humiliation of seeing a 26-year-old woman solve what my money couldn't, to finally understand. He returned to the desk, opened the drawer, and took out a letter Arthur had written before dying, a letter Peter had never shown anyone. "Son," he read aloud, "if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I want you to know something important. You don't need to be like me. You need to be a better version of yourself. Don't measure success in acres or dollars. Measure it in lives you impact positively, in people you help, in the legacy of kindness you leave behind. Money is spent, land changes hands, but the impact you make on others' lives is eternal." Peter folded the letter carefully. "Today I did something I think would make you proud. I named Martha Rivera head mechanic. A 26-year-old woman with no university degree, only 5 months on the team, and it's the best decision I've made in 6 years. He looked at the portrait one final time. "I'm trying, Dad, trying to be the leader you were. I don't know if I'll succeed, but for the first time in 6 years, I feel like I'm going in the right direction." He turned off the office light and walked out into the starry night. For the first time in years, he slept without the weight of an oppressive shadow on his chest. 6 weeks passed quickly. Hector's last day arrived with a mix of sadness and hope. Martha organized a small farewell party in the shop, nothing extravagant, just coffee, a simple cake Grace had baked. Sincere words. 32 years, Hector said, looking at the shop where he'd worked his entire adult life. Every tool here has a story. Every machine we fixed has a memory. He turned to Martha. But the most important thing I'm taking with me isn't memories of machines. It's memories of people. And Martha, you're the most exceptional person I've ever met in this profession. Martha hugged Hector. Thank you for giving me a chance when nobody else would. I didn't give you a chance. You took it. I was wise enough only not to interfere. Hector's pickup was loaded with belongings. His family was waiting. Time to go. Hector got in, rolled down the window. Martha, one last piece of advice. Never let experience turn into arrogance. Keep questioning, keep learning, maintain humility. I promise. The truck drove away. Martha watched until it disappeared in the road dust. Then she turned back to the shop. Her shop now. Her team. Her responsibility. Edward approached. Generator 3 needs preventive maintenance. Scheduled for tomorrow. First official decision as head mechanic. Yes, you and George should check the entire system, not just the obvious. Understood. The first days were intense. Martha established routines. Daily 15-minute meetings every morning. All mechanics reported detailed work for the day. She implemented a documentation system to record all repairs, parts used, time invested, weekly trainings where they shared knowledge. "Nobody knows everything," Martha explained during the first training, "but together we know a lot. Let's share." Edward taught about diesel fuel systems, George about hydraulics, Alfred about transmissions. Everyone contributed. Peter observed the transformation from a distance. The mechanical shop that previously functioned but suffered under pressure of costly failures was now collaborative, efficient, and proactive. Mistakes decreased 80% in 3 months. Maintenance costs dropped 60%. But more importantly, team morale was high. Mechanics arrived early, shared ideas, supported each other. One Saturday afternoon, Peter found Martha in the stables, caring for horses as she always did. She was brushing Cinnamon, a chestnut mare that had been Martha's favorite since she arrived at the ranch years ago. "You never left here," Peter observed. Martha smiled. "I love them. Mechanics is my profession, but horses are my peace." Peter leaned against the fence. "I've noticed changes in the shop. Efficiency, collaboration, initiative. I have a good team." "You have good leadership. That makes the difference." Comfortable silence while Martha continued brushing. "Martha, I need to tell you something. When I mocked you months ago, it was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. You already apologized, Mr. Castellanos." "I know, but I want you to understand something more. You taught me that real value doesn't come from titles or appearances. It comes from character, competence, and humility to keep learning." Peter paused. "My father tried teaching me that for years. I didn't listen. You needed 1 hour and 53 minutes to teach me a lesson he couldn't in decades." Martha set down the brush. "Your father was a great man. Workers still speak of him fondly. I know. I'm trying to be half the leader he was." "You're succeeding, Mr. Castellanos. Believe it." Peter nodded gratefully and walked away, leaving Martha with her horses and her thoughts. 3 months later, the mechanical shop worked like a well-oiled machine. Martha arrived every morning at 7, reviewed schedules, distributed tasks, solved problems others couldn't. But the deepest change wasn't technical, it was human. Edward, with 20 years' experience, now consulted Martha's opinion before making important decisions. "What do you think? Am I assuming something I shouldn't?" George documented all repairs meticulously. "Martha insists on detailed records. She's right. Memory fails. Paper doesn't." Alfred taught Robert with patience he'd never shown before. "Martha taught me that teaching strengthens knowledge. When you explain, you understand better." One Tuesday morning, a serious problem arrived. New tractor, John Deere, recent model, failed during deep ploughing. Engine stopped completely. Wouldn't start again. Martha arrived at the field with Edward and George. She examined the engine, performed initial diagnostics, checked electrical system, but something didn't make sense. "Wait," Martha said. She touched the engine at different points. Uneven temperature again. Familiar pattern. "It can't be," Edward murmured. "It's a new tractor. Barely 3 months of use." "Hard water doesn't discriminate by age," Martha responded. "If water has high mineral content and there was no preventive flushing after the first uses, deposits start accumulating immediately." She removed the valve cover, checked internal channels with flashlight. Blocked. 30% obstruction in just 3 months. "Edward, we need to establish a preventive flushing protocol every 2 months for all new tractors. Water in this region is too hard." "Noted, boss." They cleaned the channels. Tractor ran perfectly. Peter, after observing the entire process, called Martha that afternoon. "I want to implement a complete preventive maintenance program. Not just tractors, all machinery under your supervision. That'll require initial investment in time and materials. How much will we save long term? Conservatively, 30–40% in repair costs. More importantly, it'll prevent failures during critical times. Do it. Budget approved. The following Saturday, Martha was in the stables as usual. Grace arrived with a basket of lunch. I brought tamales, dear. They sat in the shade. Cinnamon approached, seeking affection. Happy? Grace asked. Martha observed the ranch, the mechanical shop where she led a respected team, the stables where she cared for horses she loved, and now she could maintain a small but comfortable house with head mechanic salary. Yes, Grandma, very happy. Antonio would be proud. Martha took Antonio's watch from her pocket and opened it. Inside, a small photograph of Antonio and Grace on their wedding day. Young, full of hope. Every time I fix an engine, I hear him, Grandma. Small problems cause big failures, my dear. Never assume. Investigate. Tools speak. Pay attention. Grace touched Martha's cheek. His knowledge lives in you, and now it lives in every mechanic you train. That's true legacy. That night, Martha wrote in a notebook where she kept personal records of repairs, lessons learned, and ideas for process improvements. Last entry, 3 months as head mechanic. Team works well, costs decreased, efficiency increased, but most importantly, we established a culture of humility and continuous learning. Nobody assumes, everyone investigates, everyone shares knowledge. Grandpa Antonio taught me that mechanics isn't just about machines. It's about solving problems systematically. It's about never letting experience turn into arrogance. It's about respect for tools, for machines, for people. Those lessons now guide the entire shop. Your knowledge didn't die with you, Grandpa. It lives on, multiplying, touching lives, and it will live as long as I breathe. Notebook closed. Light off. Outside, under the starry sky, Castellanos Ranch rested. Tractors in sheds, horses in stables, land prepared for next planting, and at the center of everything, a mechanical shop where a 26-year-old widow who once cleaned stables now led a team with earned competence, deserved respect, and a legacy of knowledge that would never die. Martha Rivera had fulfilled a promise made 3 years before. Antonio's knowledge was still alive, and it had barely begun to grow. Ndesham. Thanks for watching this incredible story of determination and skill. If this inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and join the underrated mechanics family. Don't forget to like this video and comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love connecting with our community worldwide. See you in the next story.